So it's time to go back to our top story on Foxconn founder Terry Gou joining Taiwan's presidential election. To discuss this with me is Chong Jia Yen, who's Associate Professor at the National University of Singapore. Prof, it's good to see you. We've been talking about this quite a bit today, as you can imagine, and many people have put in their thoughts on, what he would bring to the table. What about you? Why would Taiwanese voters, you think, view Mr. Gou as a worthy presidential prospect? And who's likely to vote for him?
So Terry Gou will position himself as a pro-business type of a president, someone who I suppose who promises to have bring better business ties between Taiwan and China. But I guess the question is, whether Taiwanese think that relationship, the cross-strait relationship, is worth investing in. Terry Gou, I think, is also entering the race because he feels slighted by the Kuomintang twice. This time and previous time, he supposedly wanted to run. The KMT talked to him about it, and then last minute gave the candidature to somebody else. So I guess Gou feels that he can't trust the KMT and might even want to spark an insurrection within the KMT, which he's trying to do. He's been pulling KMT legislatures to support him.
But you know what? It's likely that he'll have to differentiate himself from the KMT in a big way. Mr. Ho Yu-yi, for example, who's the KMT prospect. Both parties, want to have greater cooperation between Taiwan and China. So what's the difference?
Right. So I guess Terry Gou will have to really compete in a crowded field. So the three candidates who are running against William Lai from the DPP have more or less similar kinds of profiles. So that's Ko Wen-je from the Taiwan People's Party, Ho Yu-yi from the KMT, and Terry Gou. They all supposedly want some sort of a closer relationship with the PRC, perhaps at the cost of some security. And at the same time, they all are sort of generally pro-business, right? So the question is whether that will have an impact on welfare and other kinds of concerns in Taiwan. Ho Yu-yi brings a more law and order background. He's a former police officer. Ko Wen-je has this mayoral background. And Terry Gou, I think what he will try to position himself as is a successful business person who can then transfer that business experience into running politics in a way that I suppose has some echoes of Trump in the US.
Why don't we zoom in and get in a little more specifically with this? I mean, you say he wants to build on his business expertise. How would he do things differently, perhaps, from the way DPP's been doing it to shape Taiwan's economic policies and promote sustainable growth?
So the DPP has been working on a diversification strategy economically, so to put Taiwan into contact with a lot more different partners around the world, so they are not as dependent on any single partner, including, of course, the PRC. Now, I guess what Terry Gou would want to build on is the fact that he has had a history of being very successful as a business person in China, and he wants to leverage that and say, well, he knows how to work with the PRC. Although his business experience in the PRC is not without controversy. His Foxconn factories have in the past been associated with mass suicides because of, not mass suicide, but successive suicides because of poor working conditions. So the question is, whether he is really able to deliver what he promises. That remains to be seen.
And Prof, in every Taiwanese presidential race, the issue of building closer ties with China or consolidating Taiwan's own identity and sovereignty has always been a key focus. How do you suppose Mr. Gou will navigate this arena?
So this is one area where Terry Gou, I think he's on shakier ground because like the KMT, who he's been historically closer to, he's been talking about the 92 consensus, which in the current form of it seems to be acceptant of the one country, two systems formula. Now, the one country, two systems formula for many Taiwanese voters has lost a lot of cachet after what has happened in Hong Kong. They feel that the PRC side is not willing to live up to its promises. So there's far less interest in the 92 consensus and the one country, two systems. So I guess the question will come down to whether Terry Gou is able to successfully come up with some alternative formula for 92 to consensus, or whether he's able to sort of put that on the side and make sure that attention focuses on some other aspect of his candidature or the relationship between Taiwan and China.
And when it comes to diplomatic strategy at a time of highly polarized politics, what do you suppose is his likely stance to navigate Taiwan's international status and representation at this time?
So he's said some pretty vague things about Taiwan's international status, but that's not really clear. I mean, he's a business person, and he hasn't really had that much experience with actually diplomacy and foreign policy. Now he's trying to sell this claim that what you do in business is commensurate with what you do in everything else, but that's not necessarily the case. It will be up to Terry Goh to convince voters that he's able to transfer those sorts of experiences. It's right now, I guess people will be listening to what he has to say and what he has to offer, and if it's anything concrete.
Prof, we saw what happened in the Taiwan Strait after William Lai went up and down to the United States on his way to Paraguay. How do you see China performing stress tests on all the presidential candidates, Terry Goh included, in the lead up to January 2024 elections?
So the PRC has been increasing its exercises, but it's been doing so in a way that isn't too alarming to the population in general, because Beijing also has a conundrum. If it appears too threatening, it could really frighten Taiwanese voters into supporting William Lai even more. So it wants to give pressure, but it cannot overdo it. And I guess this would also apply to how it tries to handle the candidates on the blue side, such as Ho Yo-yi, Terry Goh, and also Ko Wen-je for that matter. So it has to somehow make it working more closely with China, appealing to them and their supporters, but at the same time, send some warning that veering too far from Beijing's line would bring some cost. It's not necessarily easy for Beijing to do that either.
We appreciate your insight so very much. Thank you, Dr. Chong Chia Yan, who's Associate Professor at National University of Singapore.